I'm a small town kid born with a big city spirit. I choose to play a lot of awesome roles in life: mom, wife, entrepreneur, CEO, board member, investor, and mentor. 17 years ago, I founded a marketing consultancy, and ever since, my husband JR and I have been building our careers and our family on the exact same timeline. Yep, that means 4 kids, 3 businesses, 2 careers, all building towards one life we love. When I discovered I could purposefully embrace all of these ands in my life, it unlocked my world. And I want that for you too. I'm Tiffany Souter, and this is Scared Confident. Today's been a weird morning at the Souter house. I should say fun morning. One of our COVID treats was that we took the family out to Utah, and all the girls learned how to ski except for Quince. And it was very cool. And so that started a really fun family tradition where we go out there in February and try to speed up time a little bit because February can be hard in the Midwest. And so got up early, took JR and 3 of them out to the airport. They're flying out to Utah. And then I am going to spend the weekend with Ainsley at a volleyball tournament. So this is our first foray into travel sports. And I'm going to tell you, this mom, it's taken me a minute to kind of get my head around enjoying it, frankly. JR gave me a much needed pep talk a couple weeks ago and was like, if you just pretended to enjoy this a little bit, it would really be more fun for everybody. And I was like, well, I don't enjoy it. And he's like, yeah, we know. So I'm getting there. I had to definitely learn how to rework my own, I say schedule, but if you're a mom and you're listening to this, you know that you get into this routine almost subconsciously of like things you get done on the weekend so that it sets the week up for success. Now 50% of our weekends for 6 months are some of it not home, all of it not home, like really, really big change. So that was making me very grumpy. And it was true. I was stealing the fun for Ains. I was probably stealing some joy out of the family. And so I've had to kind of learn how to redo things and get some things done like on Friday that I used to do on Saturday and that kind of stuff. So these like really early mornings on the weekends, all of that super new to our family. And I am definitely not good at it yet. So if people listening have hacks, please let me know. I remember my friend Leanne, she started this with her daughter with volleyball, and she's like, just buy all the gear. Don't pretend like you're not going to need it because soccer's like outside and it's like all the weather, but there's like this whole other set of stuff that you need. And there's a whole world of memes that suddenly make a lot more sense to you. So anyways, okay, that's a long preamble. What I want to talk about today, what's kind of top of mind, is a couple weeks ago, I spoke at Purdue University to a group of about 200 women. It was young women, freshmen to seniors, undergrads in college. And it's such a sweet, confusing time. At least it was for me. And I saw that in the eyes of these young women. It's like they're filled with ambition. They have all these people who have all this like appropriate expectations for their lives around them, cheering them on. And then there's this sense of like, but what if I screw it up? What if I do it wrong? What if I make one bad decision? Is there a perfect path? Am I going to get married? Should I move away? Should I stay close to family? Should I stay with friends and roommates? Am I going to be afraid in this as the world gets bigger? And it was just like, I don't know, it took me back. So I had like 9 different points that I shared with them, like what's my advice to kind of dear 20-something self, my career advice, some personal advice, and then family advice. And there were a few things that I didn't get to share that kind of hit the cutting room floor, not because I don't think they're good. I think it's still really good in perspective, but just didn't fit my presentation. So I thought I might share those here, maybe for some of the young women that subscribed and are listening to the podcast now. But it's just also, I think, when you make your mind go to your past and reflect on what would your today self go and share. Usually there's more grace, more patience, always more wisdom when you look back at yourself. And so I always learn a lot by sort of putting myself in this place where I tell the story of if I were to actually walk onto Purdue's campus and find myself as a sophomore walking around, what would my 42-year-old self go and say to my 22-year-old self? What would I say? And so these are some things that came to mind for me. One of them is to choose to see yourself and your past as an asset. You'll exhaust yourself trying to be something different than you really are. There is this process of certainly discovering who you are as you age and get older and have more experiences. I think the faster we can embrace who God made us and the way that that is like unique and important to the world and not try to become something that we aren't really or to try to like hide aspects of ourselves, but to understand that those are the things that make us interesting. And some examples for me is I grew up in the farm. My grandpas were farmers. I grew up in the country in the kind of middle of nowhere. And like we went to the city a fair amount, but I'm a small town kid. And I used to really wish that I had grown up in the city, that maybe I would have more context for how a city works. Probably would have, I would have ridden a subway before I was in my 20s. There's things I would have known about that I didn't know about because I grew up in the farm. But then I started to understand like there are things I know about because I grew up on the farm that kids who grow up in the city don't. And I grew up around a ton of family. I grew up around a ton of security. I had to work really hard. There were certainly seasons of scarcity. And so, like, I know how to navigate all of that stuff. I don't have to be in a city to be happy. I can be in a lot of different environments. And so, just like, seeing where you came from and seeing who you are today. And I'm like, kind of I don't know if the word's quirky, but there's parts of my silliness, the like stupid way that sometimes I phrase things. JR jokes, I'm a blurter. The things I think, they just come out my face. And it is true. Some of that I need to edit, but some of it's just kind of who I am. And there's like a unpolishedness sometimes to that I used to be embarrassed about. But now I understand it's just kind of part of my quirkiness. And if you're around me for a while, you come to expect she's going to say something. And I'd say 1 in 10, I probably shouldn't say. People around me are probably like more like 3 in 10, she shouldn't say. But I think it creates this actually like high trust environment because people know I literally say exactly what I'm thinking, even if it comes out stupid. And I think my willingness sometimes to sound stupid or like to say it in a way that's not very polished, there is a safety I think that actually creates for other people. And I think it makes me less intimidating. And I think that it creates an environment where people can put their ideas on the table faster because not all of mine are perfectly thought through. And I'm a bit of a blurter. So those are some examples I can think of right now in my own past or my own makeup. I actually think are superpowers of who I am, but they were parts of me that I kind of wished were different at certain times. One of my observations is like, if you look at somebody like Dolly Parton, like she grew up incredibly poor. She grew up in like the Appalachia area, and she has spent a long time talking about really those first 16 to 18 years of her life that were really formative. And she has made her entire persona really where she came from. I think she's also an expert marketer. I think that's genuine to who she is as well. But look at how she has turned what really would be like an unlucky deck of cards if you were to just look at where she came from and really celebrated and leaned into it so hard that that's what we've come to expect and love about her. I look at that as an extreme example of somebody who has really embraced where she came from and who she is and not tried to be anything other than that. The other thing I would say to my maturing self is it's never too late. It's never too late. It's never too late to start something. It's never too late to take a bet. It's never too late to take a risk. It's never too late to learn something new. And skiing is kind of that thing for me. JR and I both learned as adults. We were 35 years old, which in the skiing world is pretty old to learn how to ski. And I've heard people say to me, like, oh, I'm too old. I missed the window. I'm too afraid to fall now. It's like, well, I don't know. Like, yeah, that's fine. That's what you can pick if you want. And you can use age as a reason not to learn it, no problem. But you also cannot use that as an excuse and decide to learn. And it doesn't have to be skiing. I'm saying, like, I think there are things that we let age in our minds keep us from learning and trying new things. And maybe our peers learned it in college, but maybe life didn't come together that way for you. And you didn't have the time, you didn't have the priorities. It wasn't something that was like in the foreground in a season for you. I see that in my 40s about fitness. I'm really learning weightlifting and weight training for the first time. Is 40 too old? I don't know. Do I wish I would have known some of this in my 20s? That would have been super rad. But I didn't. And so I have a decision right now to either like learn it and maybe go at a slower pace than my 20 something year old self could have, but I'm still going to learn it. I'm still going to do it. I'm not going to be put on the sidelines because of my age. And I don't know. I just feel really passionate about that right now as I think about continuing to grow and learn. There's like an elasticity to learning that is easy. I think those muscles like more quickly atrophy or more quickly get like too tight as we get older. And there's like muscle for learning and the humility that comes with being bad at something and asking for help and all that kind of stuff, I think can get more difficult as we get older. And I think it's important to keep practicing it. So if I was going back to my 20-something-year-old self, I actually wish I would have, I don't know, I've always wanted to like be a spin instructor or like, I'm going to say be a yoga instructor. I've done like maybe 8 yoga classes in my life. Maybe that's not something I naturally love, but I wish I would have done something like that. I didn't. That's fine. Maybe I can in my 50s. I don't think there's space for it in my 40s. The thing I want to add in my 40s is becoming really good at pickleball. I'm not right now. I'm not practicing or good. The next one, I know I've talked about this on the podcast before. I know I actually did talk about this in the presentation. But it is such an important tenet of the way that I see the world. And whenever I talk about it, it connects with somebody. So I'm going to do it here again. Riding the guilt train is a choice. Riding the guilt train is a choice. Say it with me. Riding the guilt train is a choice. Now, I'm talking about this as it relates specifically to the application of being a working parent. That is where I too often see, but I'll speak from the voice of a woman because I am one, is that when you go back to work, if you feel called to go back to work, we have a baby boom at Element 3 right now. So I know there's a lot of young women that are going through this even inside of our walls. Is that when you go back to work, you don't have to feel guilty. It's a choice. This came into my life when I had my second one with Ainsley. I always thought I was going to be a stay-at-home mom just because that's what my mom was and that's what I had seen. That's what my grandmas were. It's what most of my aunts were. Like, it's just what I saw was being a stay-at-home mom. And after I had Aubrey, I was like, well, we kind of needed the money. That's part of it. And also I just was like, I don't know. I feel like maybe one would be boring. And I just knew Element 3 was going through a really tough time in that season when Aubrey was born. And I knew staying at home was actually a cop out for the hard thing I needed to do. Like, I needed to go do. I needed to fix Element 3. I needed to get it back on track. When I had Ainsley, the business was in a little different spot. I was like 31, 32 years old. And I realized I was supposed to go back to work. Like, this is what I'm supposed to do, is go back to work. I kind of love work. It gives me energy. I feel like I'm a better mom. And I was at this event and I was talking about how I felt guilty for going back to work. And the person asked me that was leading it, they said, do you really feel guilty? Do you really feel guilty? And I was like fighting with myself. I was like, the right answer, I feel like socially, is to say, yes, I really feel guilty. But the truth is, I don't actually feel guilty. I feel like that I'm not a good mom if I don't talk about being in this tension of when I'm at work, I want to be home. When I'm at home, I'm thinking about work. Like, that I'm not a good mom or a good professional if I'm not living in that tension. And they're like, what a waste of energy. What a waste of energy to ride the guilt train. Do you realize riding the guilt train is a choice? You can step on it or you can step off of it. And so literally in that moment, I stepped off the guilt train. It's like, I will never say the words I feel guilty about working, because I don't actually. We are grown-ups. We get to choose our time. And I realize some people have to work financially, and I don't know every scenario, and I know that there's outliers to everything. But a lot of us could choose a different standard of living if we really, really, really wanted one parent to stay home. And guilt can sometimes be an emotion that's getting our attention for a decision we've made that is not in keeping with our values. That's productive guilt. I've made a decision that's my body, my subconscious is trying to get my attention because this is not in keeping with who I want to be, the life I want to live, the kids I want to raise, the values I want to live. That's good guilt. But sometimes there's social guilt that you feel like you're supposed to say, yes, I feel guilty for going on this work trip. Yes, I feel guilty for missing my kid's game. Yes, I feel guilty for missing the first day of kindergarten. I don't. I don't feel guilty. This is an important part of who I am and what I've been called to do and the thing I believe I'm supposed to put into the world. And with equal intensity, I feel called to be a mom. I am and will do both of those things to the best of my ability. But in any given day or any given hour or any given minute, it is not equally being executed. That's not possible. I believe being a mom makes me better at my work, and I believe my work makes me better at being a mom. And I've chosen not to feel guilty for being equally called to those two jobs in my life. So I'm putting my story out there because if you're spending a lot of energy feeling guilty, or you know somebody, share this with them. Send this episode to them right now. Because we cannot productively step into our talents if we're working from a place where we're constantly at war with ourselves. Own the decisions you've made and choose to be excellent in them. Guilt does not serve anybody but guilt. That's who it serves. It serves guilt. That's it. Okay, I have one more. Release the outcome. Instead, focus on the next right decision. If you haven't listened to Joy Curry's episode from last week, I'd encourage you to do so because she's kind of walking through this. When you sit in your life or you sit in a microphone and you go through the process of reflecting, you kind of give yourself the benefit of remembering things in perfect clarity because you know the ending. And so it's like some of the way your mind tells the story is like, this was the beginning, this was the middle, and this is the end. And I know exactly how the story went. But the truth of it is when you're in it, when you're building a career, when you're building a family, when you're building a life, there is not perfect clarity in it. And so you're forced to do the only thing you can do, which is make the right next decision. You have to release the outcome. None of us know what's going to happen when we decide something. You can make educated guesses. You can make hypotheses. You can look at how that's worked out for other people, but it's imperfect. And so when there's decisions to be made, you have to release the outcome and make the next right decision. So here's the thing that's coming to mind for me is I have been part of Element 3 for almost 20 years of my life, across 3 decades, 20s, 30s, and 40s. That's across 4 kids. That's across 3 different jobs for my husband. That's across 2 different houses. That's across a lot of life change. And when you're part of something for a long time, you actually do have to say yes to it again in its new format and in where your life is. So as Element 3 has grown, as I has grown, as our family has grown, I have had to iterate on the choice to be part of Element 3 was a certainty in my life. But what that looked like and how we both grew was going to change and evolve over time. I see this when people are like having babies, like what's it going to be like when I come back? I see it like Joy is really not at a career crossroad, but the ingredients are beginning to change. Her kids are needing something different from her. She's got things she wanted to do at this stage in her life that she's trying to figure out, is it possible or is it not? And she doesn't know with perfect clarity how all that's going to turn out. But what you can do is make the next right decision towards where it is that you're trying to get and keep making decisions and keep pivoting because no decision is a decision. It's a decision to stay right where you are or to take all of the things that are already in motion and let them keep going. A closing thought on this is I was thinking about, goal-oriented, growth-oriented, high-achieving people like me. And I'm sure everybody listening to this podcast. You're constantly at some degree living in the future in your mind. The money you want to make, the family you want to grow, the car you want to drive, the house you want to live in, for me, the pool I want to build. But I think it's important that we don't trade the joy of today for our goals of tomorrow. So example, if you want to lose 20 pounds, find joy in the body that you have today. Find joy in it. Look at the strength, look what it can do. Find joy in it. Don't criticize it to the place where you have no joy in who you are today because of how you hope it to look tomorrow. My home, I love our home. It's beautiful. It entertains. I could let the fact that I want a pool in my backyard take the joy of our home from me today because of what I want it to look like in the future. So don't trade the joy of today for the goals of tomorrow. Still work for the goals of tomorrow. Have dreams in your heart, but don't let it take away what's right in front of you. Thank you for joining me on another episode of Scared Confident. Until next time, keep telling fear. You will not decide what happens in my life. I will. If you want to get the inside scoop, sign up for my newsletter. We decided to make content for you instead of social media algorithms. The link is waiting for you in show notes, or you can head over to tiffanysauter.com. Thanks for listening in.